Zaktar had executed countless beings across the galaxy. Warriors who charged him with blade and claw. Civilians who begged for mercy. Politicians who tried to bargain. Scientists who attempted to reason with him. He'd killed them all without hesitation. But something about this human child made his finger pause on the trigger. "You understand," Zaktar said carefully, "that I will actually kill you. This is not a bluff or intimidation tactic." "Oh, I believe you," Marcus said. "You guys have quite a reputation. Very thorough. Very efficient. It's actually kind of impressive from an organizational standpoint." Zaktar's confusion deepened. "You admire our efficiency?" "Well, sure. Conquering most of the known galaxy takes serious logistics. Someone's got to keep the supply lines running, coordinate the fleets, manage the occupied territories. That's a lot of paperwork." This conversation was becoming surreal. Zaktar had been trained for every possible scenario. Resistance fighters, suicide attackers, diplomatic negotiations, mass surrenders. But no one had ever prepared him for a philosophical discussion about military administration with a 12-year-old human while threatening. Said human with disintegration. "The child may have valuable information," Zaktar said into his communicator. "Requesting permission to interrogate before termination." Static crackled for a moment before the commander's voice returned. "Negative. We have no interest in what these primitives know. Execute and move on." Marcus tilted his head. "That seems short-sighted. What if I know something useful?" "Such as?" Zaktar asked despite himself. "Well, I know this colony's layout better than your scanners do. I know where people are likely to be hiding. I know which buildings have reinforced shelters and which ones don't. I know the tunnel system under the Eastern District that your orbital surveys probably missed." Zaktar's scanner confirmed that there were indeed tunnel systems his preliminary scans hadn't detected. How had this child known that? "You would betray your own people?" Zaktar asked. Marcus considered this. "Betray is a strong word. I'd call it practical collaboration. Most of the colonists are going to survive this either way. The Corvani don't typically commit genocide. You need workers for your empire. But if your soldiers have to hunt people down in dangerous tunnels, someone's going to get hurt unnecessarily." This was not wrong. The Corvani were conquerors, not exterminators. They preferred to integrate useful populations into their empire, rather than waste resources on wholesale slaughter. "3rd Division. Status report," came the commander's voice again. Zaktar looked down at Marcus, who was now absently examining a particularly large turnip. "Commander, the human child claims knowledge of hidden tunnel systems. Recommend brief interrogation." A pause. "Then, you have 2 minutes, soldier. Extract what information you can, then execute him." "Understood." Zaktar lowered his weapon slightly. "Speak, tell me about these tunnels." Marcus smiled again. "Well, they connect most of the residential buildings to a series of natural caves about half a mile east. The colonists dug them during the first winter as emergency storm shelters. They're not marked on any official plans because they were built without proper permits. How many people could hide there? Maybe 200. That's most of the colony." Zaktar's scanner painted the tunnel entrances Marcus described. Everything checked out. This information would save his squad considerable time and effort. "Why tell me this?" Zaktar asked. "Because," Marcus said, "you're going to find them anyway. Your technology is way better than ours. But this way, no one has to get hurt when you do." There was logic to this, cold practical logic that reminded Zaktar of Corvani tactical thinking. "Time's up, 3rd Division," the commander's voice crackled. Zaktar raised his weapon again. Marcus sat perfectly still smiling that strange, calm smile. "Any last words?" Zaktar asked. It wasn't standard protocol, but somehow seemed appropriate. "Just one question," Marcus said. "Why? Why what?" "Why do you do this? Conquer worlds, I mean. What's the point?" Zaktar paused. No one had ever asked him that question before. Not in all his years of service, too. To expand the empire, to bring order to chaos, to unite the galaxy under Corvani rule. "But why?" Marcus pressed. "What do you personally get out of it? Glory, honor, service to the empire. Do you feel glorious right now, pointing a gun at a kid in a vegetable garden?" The question hit Zaktar like a physical blow. Did he feel glorious? He was one of the most successful soldiers in the Corvani military. He'd participated in the conquest of 17 star systems. His name was known and feared across 3 sectors of the galaxy. And right now, He felt nothing. "I serve the Empire," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "That's not what I asked," Marcus said gently. "I asked what you get out of it. Not your empire. Not your commanders, you." Zaktar's finger tightened on the trigger, but he still didn't fire. "3rd Division. Report, the child is resistant to interrogation," Zaktar said into his comm. "Then stop wasting time and eliminate him." Marcus looked up at the towering alien soldier. "It's okay, you know." "What's okay?" "If you need to kill me." "I understand. You have your orders, your duty. I don't blame you for it." And somehow that made it even harder. Zaktar had killed beings who cursed him with their dying breath. He'd killed beings who begged and pleaded. He'd killed beings who tried to fight back. But he'd never had to kill someone who forgave him for it in advance. "Why aren't you afraid?" Zaktar asked. Marcus shrugged. "Fear doesn't help. Either you're going to kill me or you're not. Being scared won't change the outcome. But you're just a child. You should be terrified." "Should I?" Marcus asked. "Says who?" "What rule book are you reading from?" Zaktar realized he didn't have an answer for that. The communicator crackled again. "3rd Division, if you cannot complete this simple task, I will send 4th Division to assist you." The threat was clear. If Zaktar couldn't kill one human child, his competence would be questioned. His career could be over. But as he looked down at Marcus, still sitting calmly in the dirt with that impossible smile, Zaktar found himself wondering something he'd never wondered before. What if there was another way? The morning sky above New Haven Colony turned from soft blue to burning orange in the span of 3 heartbeats. 12-year-old Marcus Chen looked up from his vegetable garden just as the first Corvani warship descended through the clouds, its hull gleaming like polished obsidian against the dawn light. The ship was massive, larger than the entire colony's main building, larger than anything Marcus had ever seen in his short life on this frontier world. Energy crackled along its edges, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with power. Marcus should have been afraid. Any sane person would have been terrified. Instead, he smiled. "Well," he said to the turnips he'd been harvesting, "that's different." The warship touched down in the colony's central square with a sound like thunder. Dust and debris scattered in all directions. Emergency sirens began wailing across New Haven, but Marcus didn't move from his garden. He was curious to see what would happen next. The ship's boarding ramp lowered with a mechanical hiss. Steam poured out, obscuring the entrance for a moment. Then they appeared. The Corvani soldiers were everything the stories had described. 8 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted from deep purple to black depending on the light. Their eyes glowed yellow like small suns, and their claws could cut through steel. Each wore armor that hummed with energy fields and carried weapons that could level a building. They moved with the precision of a military unit that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Their boots rang against the ramp as they marched into the square. Colonists scattered like leaves in the wind, running for their homes or the safety of the surrounding forest. But Marcus just watched. The lead soldier was even larger than the others. Scars crisscrossed his face and arms, telling stories of battles across the galaxy. His armor bore the markings of a high commander. This wasn't just any raid, this was important. The commander's voice boomed across the square, amplified by his suit's speakers. "Citizens of New Haven Colony, you now stand in the presence of the Corvani Empire. Your world has been claimed. Your resistance is meaningless." A few colonists had remained hidden behind buildings and vehicles, too frightened to flee but unable to look away. Marcus could see Mrs. Patterson peeking out from behind the general store, and old Tom Bradley crouched near the communications tower. The commander continued his speech. "You will surrender all weapons, all technology, and all resources. You will serve the Empire or you will be eliminated. There is no third option." Marcus found this interesting. In all the stories he'd heard about the Corvani, they were supposed to be these brilliant strategic minds who had outwitted every species they'd encountered. But this approach seemed rather simple. "You have 5 minutes to assemble in this square for processing," the commander announced. "Any who fail to comply will be hunted down and executed." The soldiers spread out through the colony, their scanners sweeping for life signs. Marcus knew they'd find him soon enough. His hiding spot behind the garden wasn't exactly sophisticated. Sure enough, heavy footsteps approached his position. A shadow fell across the turnip patch. "Human child?" came a deep, rumbling voice. "Stand and present yourself for processing." Marcus looked up at the Corvani soldier towering over him. This one was younger than the commander, but still impressive. His scales were a brighter purple, and his scars were fewer but deeper. A veteran, but not ancient. "I'm kind of busy right now," Marcus said, holding up a turnip. "Harvest season, you know." The soldier's yellow eyes widened slightly. In all his years of conquest, no one had ever responded to his commands with casual conversation about vegetables. "Did you not hear the commander's orders?" the soldier asked. "You will come to the square immediately or face execution." Marcus considered this. "What's your name?" he asked. "What?" "Your name." "I'm Marcus. What do I call you?" The soldier stood silent for a moment, apparently trying to process this unexpected question. "I am Zakhtar, 3rd Division Assault Class." "Nice to meet you, Zakhtar," Marcus said, wiping dirt from his hands on his pants. "So about this execution thing, how exactly does that work?" Zakhtar's confusion was growing by the second. You ask me to explain how I will kill you?" "Well, yeah. I mean, if you're going to do it, I should probably know what I'm in for, right? Is it quick, painful? Do you have different methods for different situations?" This was not going according to protocol. Zakhtar had conquered dozens of worlds. He'd faced warriors, soldiers, diplomats, and cowards. He'd seen beings beg, fight, bargain, and surrender, but he'd never had anyone calmly ask about the technical details of their own execution while holding a turnip. "The plasma rifle," Zakhtar said slowly, "disintegrates the target at the molecular level. Death is instantaneous." "Huh," Marcus said thoughtfully. "That doesn't sound too bad, actually. Very science fiction. Much better than some of the historical methods humans used on each other." Zakhtar was beginning to suspect that this human child might be mentally deficient. It was the only explanation for this bizarre behavior. "You do not fear death?" Zakhtar asked. Marcus shrugged. "Everyone dies eventually. The question is whether you do anything interesting before it happens." A voice crackled through Zakhtar's communicator. "3rd Division, report status." Zakhtar activated his comm unit. "Commander, I have located a human child. He is non-compliant. Then eliminate him and continue the sweep." "Understood, Commander." Zakhtar looked down at Marcus, who was still sitting calmly in the dirt. The human boy couldn't be more than 12 Earth years old. He had dark hair, brown eyes, and was covered in garden soil. Nothing remarkable about him at all, except for that smile. It wasn't a nervous smile or a fake, brave smile. It was genuine, like he was enjoying himself. "Last chance, human," Zakhtar said, raising his plasma rifle. "Kneel before the might of the Corvani Empire, or die where you sit." Marcus looked up at the massive alien soldier pointing a weapon at his face. The smile never wavered. "You know what, Zakhtar? I think I'll just stay right here." The standoff continued for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. Zakhtar's plasma rifle hummed with contained energy. Its targeting system locked onto Marcus's chest. One squeeze of the trigger in this strange conversation would be over forever, but Marcus just kept smiling. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said, as if he weren't seconds away from death. "I always wondered what it would be like to meet an alien. I imagined all sorts of scenarios. Trade negotiations, cultural exchange, maybe even friendship. I never imagined it would be like this." "Like what?" "Disappointing." The word hit Zakhtar harder than any weapon ever had. "Disappointing," he repeated. Marcus nodded. "Don't get me wrong, you guys are impressive. Amazing technology, perfect military organization, obviously superior to humans in pretty much every way, but you're boring." Zakhtar's scales rippled with confusion and something that might have been anger. "Boring? Think about it," Marcus said, gesturing with the turnip he was still holding. "Humans are a brand new species to you, right? You've never encountered us before. We might have art, philosophy, stories, ways of thinking that are completely alien to your experience. We could teach you things, show you perspectives you've never considered. Your primitive civilization has nothing to offer the Empire. And there's the boring part," Marcus said with a sigh. "You already decided what we're worth before you even talked to us. That's not very scientific. We are not scientists. We are soldiers, so soldiers can be curious too, can't they? The best generals in human history were the ones who understood their enemies, who studied them, learned from them." Zakhtar's military training had included extensive study of defeated civilizations. Know your enemy was a fundamental principle of Corvani warfare, but that knowledge had always been tactical, learning weaknesses to exploit, not... Whatever this was, what would you teach us? Zaktar asked, surprising himself with the question. Marcus's smile grew wider. See? Now that's interesting. That's the kind of question that makes meeting aliens worthwhile. 3rd Division. The commander's voice was getting sharper. Status report immediately. Target is secured, Commander, Zaktar said. Beginning final interrogation. It wasn't technically a lie. The target was secured, and this conversation was definitely some kind of interrogation. Make it quick, soldier. Zaktar looked down at Marcus again. You have 1 minute. What would you teach the Corvani Empire? Marcus thought for a moment, still absently turning the turnip over in his hands. How about, why vegetables matter? What? You see this turnip? It's not impressive, right? Not like your starships or your weapons. But do you know what it represents? Zaktar was getting drawn into the strangest conversation of his military career. Explain. Hope, Marcus said simply. When my family came to this world, there was nothing here but rocks and dirt. But we planted seeds anyway, not knowing if they'd grow in alien soil. We tended them, watered them, waited months to see if we'd made the right choice. And now we have turnips. It doesn't sound like much, but every single vegetable in this garden is proof that humans don't just survive in new places. We make them better. We turn empty worlds into homes. Zaktar's scanner analyzed the soil composition around them. It confirmed that this area had indeed been barren when first settled, but was now rich with organic compounds from years of careful cultivation. The Corvani also improve worlds, Zaktar said. We bring order, technology, civilization. Do you? Marcus asked. Or do you just take them? Make them like all your other worlds? It was another question Zaktar had never considered. The Empire did standardize its conquered territories. Common language, common laws, common architecture. It was more efficient that way. Efficiency is not the same as improvement, Marcus continued as if reading his thoughts. When you make everything the same, you lose all the interesting differences. All the unique solutions different species found to universal problems, such as, Marcus held up the turnip again. Corvani worlds use hydroponics, right? Perfectly controlled growing conditions, maximum yield, completely predictable results. Zaktar nodded. How did this human child know about Corvani agricultural methods? But look what we figured out, Marcus said. How to make things grow in soil that's completely different from our homeworld. How to work with natural weather patterns instead of controlling them. How to breed plants that can adapt to changing conditions. Primitive methods, maybe. Or maybe just different methods. Methods that might work in places where hydroponics fail. Methods that might teach you things about adaptation and flexibility. Zaktar found himself actually considering this. The Empire had encountered worlds where their standard agricultural techniques had failed due to unusual atmospheric conditions or soil chemistry. They'd simply written those worlds off as uninhabitable. But what if there were alternatives? Time's up, 3rd Division. Execute the target and return to formation. The moment of decision had arrived. Zaktar's finger tightened on the trigger. Military discipline warred with something else. Something he couldn't quite name. Marcus looked up at him with those calm brown eyes. It's okay, he said again. I understand. And suddenly Zaktar realized he didn't understand. Didn't understand anything at all. In 300 years of life, in 50 years of military service, in 17 campaigns across the galaxy, no one had ever made him question the fundamental purpose of what he was doing. No one had ever suggested that there might be value in the things he was ordered to destroy. No one had ever forgiven him before he'd even done anything to forgive. Why? Zaktar asked quietly. Why what? Why do you forgive me? I'm about to kill you. Marcus considered this seriously. Because you're just doing what you think is right. You've been taught that conquest brings order, that the Empire's way is the only way. You're not evil, Zaktar. You're just limited. Limited? You've never been allowed to ask questions like the ones you're asking right now. You've never been encouraged to see value in different ways of doing things. That's not your fault, that's how you were trained. But you are different. Marcus nodded. Humans ask questions about everything. Sometimes it gets us in trouble, but it's also how we learn, how we grow, how we become more than we were before. And what question would you ask now? Marcus's smile turned almost mischievous. What would happen if you didn't pull that trigger? It was the most dangerous question anyone had ever asked Zaktar. It challenged everything he'd been taught, everything he'd believed, everything he'd built his life around. What would happen if he didn't pull the trigger? His military career would be over. He'd be court-martialed, possibly executed himself, but something else might happen too. Something unprecedented. Something interesting. 3rd Division. You have 10 seconds to comply or face disciplinary action. Zaktar looked down at the human child who had somehow managed to plant seeds of doubt in the most fertile ground possible, the mind of a soldier who had never learned to question orders. Marcus, he said. Quietly, yeah? What do you think would happen if I helped you instead? Marcus's smile became radiant. Now that, he said, would be the most interesting thing either of us has ever done. Zaktar had exactly 7 seconds to make a decision that would define the rest of his life. 7 seconds to choose between 300 years of conditioning and 30 minutes of conversation with a 12-year-old human who treated turnips like philosophy and execution orders like interesting puzzles. Shouldn't have been a choice at all. 5 seconds. 3rd Division. Zaktar's grip tightened on his plasma rifle. The weapon's energy cell hummed at full charge. One trigger pull would end this impossible conversation and return his world to its proper, predictable order. Marcus sat perfectly still in the dirt, still holding his turnip, still smiling. Whatever you choose, he said quietly. Thank you for actually thinking about it. 3 seconds. And in that moment, Zaktar realized something that would have horrified his instructors at the military academy. He had never actually thought about his choices before. He had simply followed orders, completed objectives, served the Empire's will. He had never asked himself what he wanted. 1 second, soldier. Comply, or... Zaktar moved with the lightning reflexes of a trained killer. His plasma rifle swung in a perfect arc, its barrel tracking toward its target with mechanical precision. But instead of pointing at Marcus, it pointed at the communicator on his own wrist. The plasma bolt vaporized the device in a shower of sparks. Well, Marcus said cheerfully, that was definitely not what I was expecting. Zaktar stared at the smoking remains of his comm unit as if he'd never seen it before. In a way, he hadn't. He'd never seen it as a chain before, a leash connecting him to masters who had never asked his opinion about anything. I believe, Zaktar said slowly, I have just committed treason. Technically, you've just experienced equipment failure, Marcus pointed out. Could happen to anyone in a combat situation. Very unfortunate. You suggest I lie to my commanders? I suggest you choose your words carefully. There's a difference. Shouting voices carried across the colony square. The other Corvani soldiers were calling for 3rd Division to report. Their voices carried notes of confusion and growing alarm. They will come looking for me, Zaktar said. Probably. What will you tell them? Zaktar looked down at Marcus, who had finally stood up and was brushing dirt off his pants. Even standing, the human child barely reached Zaktar's waist, and yet somehow, in the space of half an hour, this tiny being had managed to fracture foundations that had been 3 centuries in the building. I will tell them the truth, Zaktar said, that I encountered something I was not prepared for. And what was that? A question I could not answer. Marcus nodded approvingly. Good answer. What was the question? Zaktar paused, considering. Then why am I here? And? Do you have an answer now? No, Zaktar said. But I think that is the point. Heavy footsteps approached from the direction of the square. 2 other Corvani soldiers appeared around the corner of a storage building, their weapons raised and ready. Zaktar recognized them. Veltar from 4th Division and Grixka from 2nd. Both were veteran soldiers, both completely loyal to the Empire. Both would kill him without hesitation if they suspected treason. 3rd Division, Veltar called out. We lost your signal. Report status. Equipment malfunction, Zaktar replied, gesturing to his destroyed communicator. Plasma discharge from a faulty power coupling. Veltar's scanner swept over the area, confirming the energy residue from the plasma blast. And the human? Zaktar's mind raced. What could he say that would be true but not treasonous? How could he protect Marcus without exposing his own change of heart? The human is interesting, he said finally. Grixka snorted with amusement. They all look the same to me. Small, weak, useless. This one is different, Zaktar said carefully. He has information about the colony's layout. Defensive positions, hidden areas, civilian populations. It was true after all. Marcus had given him that information freely. So extract it and execute him, Veltar said impatiently. The commander wants this sector cleared in 10 minutes. Marcus chose that moment to speak up. Hello, he said politely to the new arrivals. I'm Marcus. Nice to meet you. Both soldiers stared at him in amazement. Veltar's translator unit had to run the greeting twice before it could process the casual friendliness in the human's tone. It speaks to us directly? Grixka asked. Marcus corrected gently. And yes, I speak to everyone directly. It's more efficient than talking about people like they're not there. Veltar looked at Zaktar. Is this creature mentally deficient? I don't think so, Zaktar said. I think he simply sees things differently than we do. How so? And there it was. The question that would determine whether Zaktar's newfound doubts would remain his secret or become public knowledge. How could he explain what Marcus had shown him without sounding like he'd lost his mind? He asked questions, Zaktar said finally. What kind of questions? Veltar asked. Marcus answered before Zaktar could speak. Like, why do you guys all wear the same armor? Don't you ever want to customize it? Add personal touches? Make it reflect who you are as individuals? Grixka's jaw dropped. Why would we want to do that? Because you're not all exactly the same, are you? You must have different experiences, different skills, different ways of thinking. Why hide all that interesting diversity behind identical equipment? Uniformity ensures unit cohesion, Veltar said automatically. Individual expression leads to chaos and inefficiency. Does it? Marcus asked. Or does it lead to innovation and adaptability? Zaktar watched his fellow soldiers' faces as they processed this question. He could see the same confusion he'd felt earlier, the same uncomfortable stirring of thoughts that had never been allowed to fully form. This creature speaks nonsense, Grixka said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Marcus agreed cheerfully, but it's interesting nonsense, don't you think? I mean, when's the last time anyone asked you what you personally thought about anything? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zaktar saw Veltar's expression flicker with something that might have been surprise or recognition. Or fear. We think what the Empire requires us to think, Veltar said firmly. But what do you think? Marcus pressed. Not the Empire, you, Veltar, right? What does Veltar think when he's alone? When no one's watching, when there are no orders to follow? Veltar took a step backward as if physically struck. We don't. That is not. It's okay, Marcus said gently. You don't have to answer. But maybe it's worth thinking about. A new voice cut through the air. 4th Division. 2nd Division. Report to the square immediately. The commander. And he did not sound pleased. We must go, Veltar said. But he was still staring at Marcus with an expression of confused fascination. What about the human? Grixka asked. Zaktar felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders again. I will complete the interrogation and execute him as ordered. See that you do, Veltar said. The commander is already displeased with the delays in this sector. The two soldiers departed, but Zaktar noticed that both of them kept glancing back at Marcus as they walked away. When they were gone, Marcus looked up at Zaktar with an expression of curious satisfaction. That was interesting. You have infected them with your questions, Zaktar said. Infected? That's one way to put it. I prefer to think of it as planting seeds. Seeds? Marcus held up his turnip again. Seeds grow in the strangest places if you give them enough time. From the central square came the sound of the commander's voice, raised in what was clearly a disciplinary speech. Other sounds suggested that the remaining colonists were being herded together for processing. What happens now? Zaktar asked. Well, Marcus said, that depends on what you want to happen. It was another impossible question. What did Zaktar want? He'd never been asked to consider his desires, only his duties. I want, Zaktar began, then stopped. The words felt strange in his mouth. Yeah? I want to understand. I want to know what else I have never been allowed to ask. Marcus's smile was radiant. Now we're getting somewhere. But I am still a Corvani soldier. I still have duties, obligations, do you? Or do you have choices that you've been taught to call duties? Another seed planted in fertile ground. Zaktar felt his worldview shifting again. Foundations cracking that he'd never realized were there. If I choose to help you, Zaktar said, what would you have me do? Marcus considered this carefully. I'd ask you to help me save my people. Not by fighting your army, that would be stupid. But by showing your fellow soldiers what you've started to see. that there might be value in what you've been ordered to destroy. That would be treason, would it? Or would it be evolution? The words hit Zaktar like a physical blow. Evolution, change, growth, concepts that were forbidden in the rigid hierarchy of the Corvani military, concepts that suddenly seemed more important than following orders. How? Zaktar asked. The same way you learned, Marcus said. One question at a time. Epilogue, The Seeds of Tomorrow. 3 months later, the Corvani High Command received the most unusual report in the Empire's 1,000-year history. The conquest of New Haven Colony had been completed successfully. The human population had been processed and integrated into the Imperial workforce. The planet's resources had been cataloged and exploitation rights assigned. But something unprecedented had happened during the occupation. 7 Corvani soldiers had submitted formal requests for extended cultural study assignments. They wanted to learn human agricultural techniques, artistic expressions, and philosophical frameworks. They claimed these studies could provide tactical advantages in future conquests. The requests were signed by 3rd Division Soldier Zaktar, 4th Division Soldier Veltar, 2nd Division Soldier Grixka, and 4 others who had somehow been infected by the same inexplicable curiosity. High Command was baffled. Soldiers didn't request cultural studies. Soldiers followed orders, completed missions, served the Empire's will without question. But these 7 had questions. Lots of questions. And they weren't the only ones. Reports began filtering in from other conquered worlds where Corvani soldiers had begun asking strange questions of local populations. Questions about art, music, poetry, philosophy, cooking, gardening, storytelling, and dozens of other irrelevant topics. Some commanders reported discipline problems among troops who had been exposed to these questioning soldiers. Others reported unexpected innovations in resource management and population integration. The High Command found itself facing a question they had never had to consider. What do you do when your perfect military machine starts thinking for itself? Back on New Haven Colony, Marcus Chen tended his expanded garden with the help of his unlikely friend. Zaktar had proven surprisingly adept at agriculture, and his enhanced strength made many tasks much easier. The tomatoes are coming in well this year, Marcus observed, harvesting a particularly large specimen. The soil composition has improved significantly since we began the composting program, Zaktar agreed. He had taken to speaking in a more natural, less formal manner over the past months. See? Cooperation really does work better than conquest. I am beginning to understand this, though I suspect my former commanders would disagree. Marcus grinned. Former commanders? I submitted my resignation from active military service last week. I have requested assignment to the Cultural Integration Department. Did such a department exist before you requested assignment to it? No, but it does now. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, 2 beings from different worlds finding common ground in the simple act of nurturing growing things. Marcus, Zaktar said eventually, yeah? I have been thinking about our first conversation. The one where you were going to kill me? Yes. You said something that day that I did not fully understand at the time. Marcus paused in his harvesting. What was that? You said fear doesn't help. That being scared wouldn't change the outcome. But I think you were wrong. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh? I was afraid that day. Not